Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and build your financial pyramid from the absolute ground up. We're going to start with the foundational nuts and bolts of everyday budgeting, and then we're going to climb all the way to the very peak, extreme early retirement. Because whether you're just trying to figure out where your paycheck vanishes to each month, or you're literally plotting a way to leave the workforce decades ahead of schedule, you know what? The underlying math is actually surprisingly similar.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover building your financial foundation, the 50-30-20 rule, funding your emergency pot, the FIRE movement explained, and finally, FIRE strategies and challenges. Let's get right to it.
All right, part 1. Building your financial foundation.
Look, you can't build a house on a shaky foundation, right? And the exact same rule applies to your wealth. Before you can realistically plan your spending, let alone dream of retiring early, you have to know exactly what you have coming in and going out on a daily basis. To build that base, you need a really simple, highly effective framework, like the Erin Condren budgeting method. You start by calculating your actual take-home pay. I'm talking about what truly lands in your bank account, not your gross salary. Then, you track down every single expense, separating the fixed costs, like your rent and utilities, from the variable ones, like groceries and dining out. By categorizing these expenses, it's like a giant puzzle coming together. You immediately start to see patterns. From there, you set your goals, and absolutely crucially, you track your spending daily so you can adjust your habits in real time.
And you know, it turns out there is just massive power in simply putting a pen to paper. Making your goals specific, measurable, and physically writing them down mathematically increases your chances of actually achieving them by a massive 42%. No way, right? But it's true. Whether it's a short-term goal like building a vacation fund or a long-term goal like saving for a house down payment, writing it out forces clarity. It keeps you accountable to your own financial ambitions.
Moving on to part 2, the 50-30-20 rule.
Okay, so once you're actively tracking your money and you know your goals, you need a system to allocate your income and cash. You basically need a framework that tells your money exactly where to go. And that brings us to an absolute cornerstone of modern personal finance, the 50-30-20 rule. This was notably popularized by Senator Elizabeth Warren, and it's just a simple, stress-free way to divide your income. 50% goes directly to your non-negotiable needs, so covering rent, groceries, basic transportation first. Next, 30% is allocated to your wants. And yes, you can totally still buy that overpriced artisanal latte or those concert tickets, because let's be real, a budget that doesn't let you enjoy your life is a budget you're eventually going to abandon. Finally, that last 20% is strictly dedicated to building wealth through savings, investments, and knocking out debt. It's really the perfect balance of responsibility and enjoyment.
Which brings us to part 3, funding your emergency pot.
So you have your budget, you have your 50-30-20 allocation, but now you need to protect this brand new system from life's inevitable curveballs. Cars break down, roofs leak, unexpected medical bills happen. Experts at Fidelity recommend having an emergency fund that can cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Now notice, I didn't say 3 to 6 months of your full salary. You only need to save enough to cover your essential expenses, that 50% needs category we literally just talked about. If your absolute survival expenses are $2,000 a month, your target emergency pot should be somewhere between $6,000 and $12,000, sitting safely in an easy access account where you can grab it the exact moment trouble strikes.
To build this critical safety net efficiently, you need a game plan. First off, you absolutely must wipe out high-interest credit card debt. Think of it like a massive leak in your financial boat. It'll sink your wealth way faster than you can save it. Next, open an entirely separate, independent savings account. Seriously, if your emergency fund sits in your main checking account, you're going to accidentally spend it on non-emergencies. Finally, automate the whole shebang. Set up a regular standing order so a chunk of your paycheck moves to savings before you even see it. Out of sight, out of mind.
All right, part 4, the FIRE movement explained.
Now that your foundation is rock solid and protected by that emergency fund, we can look all the way up at the top of the pyramid. This is where people use these exact same basic math principles to completely escape the traditional 9-to-5 grind decades early. Welcome to the FIRE movement, Financial Independence, Retire Early. Originating from personal finance books back in the 1990s like Your Money or Your Life, and then really popularized by blogs in the 2010s, FIRE flips traditional financial advice entirely on its head. Instead of saving, the standard 10 to 15% of their income for a retirement in their 60s, FIRE practitioners advocate for extreme frugality. They push their savings rates to a shocking 50% or even higher, and they pair that with aggressive investing to generate massive passive income.
And here is where the radical math of FIRE truly shines. The relationship between your savings rate and your time is absolute.
If you save the traditional 10% of your income, well, you have to work 9 full years just to bank 1 year of living expenses. But by aggressively pushing that savings rate to 50%, your living expenses drop drastically, meaning you only have to work 1 year to buy 1 year of total freedom. It's incredible. If you push it to 75%, you are buying a year of freedom every 4 months.
So when can you finally clock out for good? Well, the magic number in the FIRE community is 25. Based on the famous 4% rule introduced by financial planner William Bengen in 1994, the math suggests that once your investment portfolio reaches 25 times your annual living expenses, you are financially independent. The theory here is that you can withdraw 4% of that portfolio every single year, adjusted for inflation, of course, and the compound growth of the investments will prevent you from ever running out of cash.
However, the 4% rule was originally designed for a standard 30-year retirement. Some modern economists, like Karsten Jeske, point out a pretty critical flaw. If you're retiring in your 30s, your retirement might last 50 or 60 years. For a timeline that long, they argue you need to be much more conservative, aiming instead for a 3.25 to 3.5% withdrawal rate. That means instead of saving 25 times your annual expenses, you really need to accumulate 30 times or more to ensure you don't outlive your money.
And finally, Part 5, FIRE strategies and challenges.
Of course, achieving this level of financial freedom and accumulating a portfolio that massive requires extreme lifestyle design. The good news is, there's no single right way to do it. So what's your flavor of FIRE? You might embrace extreme frugality with lean FIRE, keeping expenses tiny so you can retire on a much smaller portfolio. Or if you want luxury, you'd aim for fat FIRE, which obviously requires millions in the bank. Coast FIRE is really fascinating. You save incredibly aggressively in your 20s, and then you simply let compound interest do all the heavy lifting until you hit traditional retirement age. Or you might opt from barista FIRE, where you semi-retire but keep working part-time at a place like, say, Starbucks, specifically to cover day-to-day cash flow and keep your health insurance benefits.
Another absolutely fascinating strategy is geographic arbitrage, a concept popularized by Tim Ferriss. Early retirees often artificially stretch the power of their portfolios by moving. This is basically a brilliant shortcut to making the math work faster. Within the US, that might mean moving to a state with no income tax, like Texas or Florida. Internationally, it means relocating to beautiful, affordable destinations like Mexico, Portugal, or Thailand, where housing and daily expenses are a fraction of the cost. It makes your early retirement dollars go significantly further.
But, it's vital to remember that it's not all just beaches and absolute freedom. Early retirees face massive logistical hurdles in the United States. Specifically, bridging the gap for healthcare coverage before Medicare kicks in at 65 is a giant obstacle. One estimate actually shows a 35-year-old could face nearly $380,000 in healthcare costs over that gap alone. Plus, they have to navigate complex tax rules to avoid 10% penalties when withdrawing from retirement accounts early. They have to rely on really specific strategies like Roth IRA conversion ladders or the Rule of 55 just to access their own money without facing severe financial punishment.
Ultimately, the math behind wealth building scales beautifully, right from that basic 50-30-20 budget straight through to the extreme savings rates of the FIRE movement. Every single dollar you intentionally categorize and save fundamentally alters your timeline. So, whether you're just sitting down to build your very first budget or you are aggressively chasing down an early retirement, I want to leave you with the ultimate question. If you drastically cut your expenses today, how many years of absolute freedom could you buy for tomorrow?